What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review one of my most anticipated movies of the summer, Weapons, the new horror film written and directed by Zach Cregger, the director who gave us Barbarian back in 2022. And I'll go totally spoiler-free initially, but in the latter part of my video, and I'll give you a verbal warning as well as a time code below, I have one criticism or one grievance against the movie which I can't fully articulate unless I go into spoilers. But let me be abundantly clear, this movie does have a big, fat, juicy reveal about 2/3 of the way through the movie that'll either make or break the movie for you. So if you're at all sensitive to spoilers, definitely stay away from any horror movie forums or Twitter or X or whatever the case might be, because as you've likely already gathered, if you've seen the trailer and you're excited for the movie, there's a big, fat, juicy mystery at the core of the movie. So what is this mystery that I'm describing so vaguely and ambiguously? Here's the official premise from IMDb. When all but one child from the same class mysteriously vanish on the same night at exactly the same time, a community is left questioning who or what is behind their disappearance. And the movie stars Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, Alden Ehrenreich, and a few other actors, but I must say, Julia Garner is fucking fantastic in this. While I didn't necessarily have a lot of kind things to say about her as the Silver Surfer in the most recent Fantastic Four movie, this is the kind of movie she should be making. She is, let's just say, she's vulnerable, but she's strong. She's also kind of hot and fun and desirable. And in any case, she definitely commands the attention of the audience anytime that she is the central character. But this movie has an interesting structure where you're exploring this mystery from multiple points of view. She is but one of those points of view. But Josh Brolin, Thanos himself, he's absolutely fantastic, holding nothing back. He's one of the aggrieved parents who's wondering what the hell happened to their kids.
We're talking about 17 kids in one classroom. I want to know what happened in that classroom.
And initially, he's very eager and very prone to lay the blame at the doorstep of the teacher of that class where everybody vanished, which happens to be Julia Garner. So they have a lot of tension initially. And Alden Ehrenreich, who I really like in some movies, like he perhaps was miscast as Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, perhaps a movie that shouldn't have even been made. But he can be fantastic when you give him the right material, like when he was in the Coen Brothers movie Hail Caesar. I thought it was the best part of the movie. So he's got some serious chops. He's pretty good in this, but he's not quite on the same level as Josh Brolin and Julia Garner. In any case, all that aside, in spite of the fact that I have one major reservation or grievance or criticism of the movie, I do think it's going to do extremely well. My audience was clapping and laughing and having a great time. It's been incredibly well reviewed. And throughout the movie, it kind of ping-pongs back and forth between some really creepy, eerie scenes that I wouldn't say are outright horror. I mean, there are a few jump scares which are kind of lazy. I think most jump scares are pretty lazy in general. But there are a few creepy moments where I felt the chills. And then they're followed usually by some weird, like kind of esoteric, dark comedy. And on one hand, it's interesting seeing a director who is equally adept at both creating comedy as well as horror, because I feel like both comedy and horror are very tough genres to nail or to get right. So if you can make the audience laugh and feel the heebie-jeebies, you obviously have talent as a director. So I'm not trying to avoid acknowledging that Zach Cregger clearly has chops, definitely has talent, and I will be seeing whatever his future movies might be. But I had a bit of a problem with his approach to the story, because anytime he gave me a legit scare, and I did feel, creepy thrills and all that good stuff, because he allowed us to laugh afterwards, and usually people were laughing hard, it immediately dispelled all the tension. I'm like, God damn, dude, like, you had me kind of freaked out and in a state of suspense and dread and anticipating what might come. And then you immediately dispel it and make it feel like it's all kind of immaterial, or that it doesn't matter. For me, it made it feel like the movie was losing some of its stakes, but that might be a very subjective thing. It wouldn't surprise me at all if people have a very different reaction, because his previous movie, Barbarian, I also was 50-50 on. I loved parts and I hated parts, but people loved Barbarian. It was a smash hit. I think he made that movie for like $4 million or $5 million, and it ultimately ended up grossing like 40 or something like that. It was an absolute smash for a low-budget movie, and he's working with a much bigger budget this time around. And I think Warner Brothers is about to extend their winning streak basically since Sinners, and a Minecraft movie, and Final Destination Bloodlines, and the distribution rights they had for F1, and now Superman. I mean, Superman was kind of a mixed bag. It was a 50-50 movie where it kind of remains to be seen if it'll be a hit. But Warner Brothers has been on a major hot streak since about April, after a series of kind of embarrassing failures. And I do think that Weapons will extend their winning streak. Whether or not it will last all the way up to One Battle After Another, who can say? That's a very expensive movie. But we're here to talk about horror, not about One Battle After Another. But I would say for like the first half of the movie, I was totally on board. Wherever Zach Cregger wanted to go, I was willing to follow. It was moody and atmospheric and stylish, had some cool music by artists like George Harrison, who I really like. And so I was totally on board. But there's a moment in this movie, like, as you have to with every mystery, where you finally have to show your cards and explain the plot or explain what's happening. Or if you're not going to explain, that's a very tricky thing. But this movie chooses to unveil the mystery and allow us like an insider's look into it. And I thought it was so stupid and so dumb and so off-putting and so dull. And the movie's already a little overly long. I think it's 2 hours and 10 minutes or 2 hours and 5 minutes? Hang on one sec. It is 2 hours and 8 minutes. And then for like 30 or 40 minutes after the big reveal, I was just grinding my teeth in frustration, where I was starting to second guess and kind of reevaluate in my mind everything I'd seen up to that point, wondering whether or not it made sense. And it just left me very angry and very frustrated and very bored. And then luckily, by some miracle, like in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, totally rebounded. There's a scene at the end which is so outrageous and so just bananas and unhinged that the audience was just screaming with laughter. But once again, for a movie that's trying to be, really like grim and foreboding and really terrifying at times because of all the frequent laughter, it's a really tough tightrope walk for any filmmaker. There are some films that are absolutely brilliant as a horror comedy. Like the most obvious example would be An American Werewolf in London, where when it's funny, it's really fucking funny, and when it's scary, it's really fucking scary, and somehow the two don't clash. I think with Weapons, the horror and the comedy do clash a little bit. Unless what you're looking for is just weird, dark comedy, then it'll absolutely deliver. But I think this is just yet another example where a filmmaker has a really great idea for a movie, a really great premise, a really great hook, as you see in the trailer. The trailer's absolutely outstanding. As I said before, one of my most anticipated movies of the year. But what Zach Cregger doesn't have is a great ending to the movie, and that's a very common problem. Many years ago, I used to work as a script reader for Phoenix Pictures, writing coverage, and I would read many screenplays every week. And even the terrible screenplays typically start with their best idea, putting their best foot forward, and after like 10 or 15 pages, they just totally come unspooled. Very rarely does a movie start great or screenplay start great and end great. That's a very rare, special, beautiful, wonderful thing, which you very rarely come across. With Weapons, you could tell he had an unbelievably cool idea for a movie, but he didn't quite know how to stick the landing. Or who knows? It could just be me. Maybe I'm the one person who's not going to like the ending, but that's fine. I don't mind being the one person who's like, you know what, the ending didn't quite work for me. But if everybody else is having a great time, fantastic. In general, I'm a big fan of the horror genre right now, and I love how there's so many young filmmakers that are writing original stories that we've never seen before. I will say this. Weapons is not based on an old classic from the 70s or 80s. It's not based on a toy. It's not based on a video game. This is an original screenplay, and I love seeing writer-directors getting a shot to tell their own stories their own way. And if I don't like their ending, that's fine. Other people, I'm sure, are going to like the ending, and I do think this movie is going to be ultimately very successful. But my biggest problem with the ending is that I'm now second-guessing a lot of the things that I liked in the first part of the movie. This is not a spoiler, but there are a lot of like visions and dreams and out-of-body experiences as people are trying to understand this mystery as it unfolds in their small town. And once you know the source of the disappearance, you're like, well, wait a second. Those visions and those dreams, they don't make any fucking sense now. Like, they were cool when I didn't know the answer, but now that I know the answer, I'm like, well, they don't compute. Like, he's not organically building toward the big reveal. And maybe it's time for me just to get into the big spoiler section, because there is a writer out there who did a similar story which had an excellent organic way of leading up to the reveal, and it's just going to provide the perfect compare and contrast. So last spoiler warning, 3, 2, 1. The ending of this movie, as you build toward the ending, you realize there's a spooky lady in this town who's basically a witch, and she is dying of cancer, and she's basically camping out at her relative's house, trying to figure out a way to stay alive just a little bit longer, and she's trying a variety of different spells that she has in kind of her overall toolkit. And finally, she lands on the idea of using the spell to summon all these kids to her basement, where, for whatever reason, she never seems to try to possess them or take over their bodies or their souls or anything like that. But she's basically forcing the one kid in the classroom who didn't disappear to keep them alive and feed them. And he's also keeping his parents alive at the same time. But this is where the movie starts to totally fall apart for me. First and foremost, you cannot keep people alive for a month who are standing there in a basement just by having a stupid little 8-year-old kid periodically serve them food. They would collapse, they would die, they would expire. But immediately you start calling bullshit that the premise is starting to come unglued. But I don't mind if a movie is wildly implausible, as long as I can get on board with like the style or a really great performance. But the actress playing the witch, she's so unhinged and silly and stupid and so garish in her appearance. I just felt like I was looking at like some like homeless person dressed up like Ronald McDonald, who wasn't scary at all. She wasn't mysterious at all. I didn't want to know anything about the supernatural nature of her abilities. Like everything about her, I was like, this is just the dumbest fucking villain that I've ever seen in a horror movie. But what annoyed me even more was that there's nothing in the movie to kind of lead up to or tease this inevitable supernatural explanation that you basically have a wizard or witch or whatever, you know, warlock, whatever you want to call her, who has the ability to take over people's minds and use them as weapons, and all she needs is like a little bit of their hair and a little bit of her blood, and she can basically like send them like a heat-seeking missile out to kill somebody or have them run wherever she likes. But the movie fails to do any of the heavy lifting that would make this big reveal feel organic to the rest of the movie. Even if it's extremely subtle, there needed to be a little teeny tiny trail of breadcrumbs leading up to this big reveal where with hindsight you would be like, oh my god, now I get it. This is the most perfect natural explanation imaginable given all those little clues that we had along the way. It just kind of comes out of the blue. But a writer who did this really, really well decades ago, a very similar premise, was Stephen King with a story called Grandma in his collection of short stories called Skeleton Crew, where a little kid's left home alone with his grandmother, who's just like a sick old invalid. And it's a dark and stormy night, and his parents are away, and he keeps hoping that somebody will come home and relieve him because his grandmother creeps him out. And he keeps thinking, because he's alone, he keeps thinking about all these episodes, these spells that his grandmother has had in past years where she's speaking gibberish or speaking in tongue. I'm getting chills even remembering it. But over the course of the storm, he starts to realize, oh my God, like my grandmother truly is a witch, and she is about to possess me. And by the time the parents get home, the child has actually been possessed by the grandmother. And it's terrifying. It's a fantastic, mean and lean, little nasty short story. But the big reveal of the witch, it doesn't come out of the blue because he has, in the most subtle way possible, kind of led you up to that conclusion so that when he reveals it, you're like, I get it. It's all clear now. I'm in the hands of a master storyteller. Zach Cregger is very talented. He's not a master storyteller. But getting back to weapons, once you know where the story is leading, you basically have this really silly, stupid-looking witch living in this family's house, kind of camping out, trying to find a way to extend her life. Then you start to think back like, well, wait a second, how come she was appearing in different people's dreams that she hasn't interacted with yet? Like, how come they're having, like Julia Garner's character, she's having all these scary nightmares where like she'll look up at her ceiling and see like a scary clown face. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They've had no interaction. She doesn't have any items of her clothing or her hair or anything like that. Why is she having these strange dreams? They're scary when you experience them, but they're stupid in hindsight. But let's take a better movie, a movie that's adjacent to this, but which does earn its ending, Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby, throughout the great majority of the movie, the first time you see it, you're not really thinking about like witchcraft or the devil or anything like that. But by the end of the movie, you think back at all the clues that were left every step of the way. Like, oh, I get it. They were telling us every step of the way that she's living next door to a coven that has basically like seduced her husband into making a deal with the devil so that he can impregnate her and bring the Antichrist into the world. And it's what allows Rosemary's Baby to be rewatched over and over and over again. You can see Rosemary's Baby 100 times and still marvel at the genius and the story construction all over again. It's a true Hall of Fame horror classic. And the great horror classics of the past, like movies by David Cronenberg, you can, anytime you watch them, it's great all over again. I think Weapons is going to completely, totally disintegrate upon subsequent viewings. Also, as long as I'm being critical, it must be said, one of the final trailers for this movie had the goddamn gall and the audacity to reuse the poem Boots by Rudyard Kipling during the trailer, as was used by the initial trailer for 28 years later. That was absolutely shameless. Whoever cut that trailer, whichever marketing exec put it out there, they deserve to be flogged publicly in the town square because that is just shameless. When you quite literally rip off this 100-year-old poem in order to try to make your trailer seem cool, like a trailer which made a big splash 8 months ago, shame on you.
There's no discharge in the war.
Weapons. Only in theaters August 8th. Rated R.
And the more I talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I find the movie frustrating when I think back to it. Like, there's some very eerie, atmospheric voiceover narration at the beginning and at the end of the movie.
This is a true story that happened in my town.
a character that we never meet. It's just a little girl who's trying to be, like the third person omniscient narrator. But it's like, which character is this? What perspective does she have on the story? Like when you hear really great voiceover narration in a movie like Badlands, like we have the voiceover narration by Sissy Spacek, or when you watch a movie like True Romance, which is inspired by Badlands, and you have the voiceover narration by Patricia Arquette, or a movie like Full Metal Jacket or Clockwork Orange, like you've got like the actual like the central character narrating. Or in the case of a movie like Barry Lyndon, it comes from a novel and you have that third-person omniscient narrator who's basically reading the text of the book, and it makes total sense. The voiceover here just seems like a little bit pretentious, like the movie's taking itself a little bit too seriously, like this elaborate story construction in the first half. We get the point of view for either like 5 or 6 main characters, almost like it's like Pulp Fiction, where he's like, he will go forward a bit, and then he'll go back from a different point of view. Then he'll go forward up to a point, then he'll go back from a different point of view. And it's all leading up to this big reveal of this witch, where we finally get the point of view of the kid. But it was almost like a meaningless creative exercise creating this overly complex story construction when the story in the end turns out to be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. They probably could have told the entire story from the point of view of Julia Garner's character and the little boy, just cutting back and forth between the two of them, but still told it like in real time. I just feel like the director was trying a little bit too hard to be clever with his construction and kind of tripping over his feet. And now that I think about it, when it comes to the voiceover narration, they should have just used the character of Alex, the little boy at the core of the story, looking back on his experiences in the movie, and it would have made perfect sense. So there you go. I just solved one of the movie's many problems. And also, I just don't buy it that an 8-year-old could handle the strain of trying to keep 17 classmates and his parents alive with cans of soup while still going to school and maintaining the appearance of a normal life. At some point, he would just break down weeping or collapse, or people would just start fucking dying. You can't have 17 little kids standing in a basement for a fucking month living off Campbell's soup without them just pissing and shitting themselves to death and just collapsing. I don't buy any of it. However, the little kids in the basement, the big climax is the little kid finally figures out enough about the magic, about how to turn the kids, the weapons, against the witch herself, which leads to like 120 seconds of some of the most delirious comedy you will see this year, where all these kids that have been getting tormented and abused by this witch for all this time, they finally turn her against her and just chase her through the suburbs. And my audience was howling. And I get it, even though I was so bored and so frustrated for like the last 30, 40 minutes leading up to that part, when the kids finally do get unleashed, it was hilarious. So any movie that starts strong and ends strong, typically a lot of people will be very forgiving about what happens in the middle, or they'll just forget. And a lot of times, if you're really enjoying a movie for 30, 40, 50 minutes, you're willing to kind of turn a blind eye to a movie's flaws. I do this all the time, as long as they can stick the landing. So, as I said earlier, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Weapons is wildly popular, has great audience scores, great reviews, and I think they made it for like 35 or 36 million. Let me see what the budget real quick. Yeah, I'm seeing here that the movie has a budget of $38 million, $10 million of which went to Cregger for writing, directing, and producing the movie. That's a hell of a lot of money for a young filmmaker. So pressure's on. This can't just be a little modest success. It actually does need to do pretty well for New Line, but I've got a pretty high level of confidence that it will do just fine, because horror junkies, if you can at least deliver halfway or 2/3 of the way, horror junkies tend to be pretty forgiving. But $38 million, that's a real movie. So Zach Cregger will need to deliver, or the audience will need to show up. But I think as far as being a showcase for the talents of the actors involved, I think it's going to be a great calling card for all of them moving forward. Julia Garner definitely steals the show. Her character is absolutely fantastic. I totally fell in love with her. Josh Brolin's terrific. Alden Ehrenreich's pretty good. Benedict Wong is okay. Basically, he's kind of doing the same routine that he does in a lot of other movies. But there's a young actor by the name of Austin Abrams, who plays basically like a crackhead or a meth head. He's basically a huge junkie / criminal who is basically like stealing crap from all around the neighborhood and trying to stay alive and like feed his habit by like selling little like odds and ends and that sort of thing. And then he happens to stumble upon all these kids while he's trying to rob the house. And then once he starts getting dreams of getting a big reward, his storyline is pretty goddamn funny. So there are times where the movie absolutely comes to life, and you will laugh hard throughout. I think sometimes the comedy does counteract the horror, but there might be just as many people might say, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It was funny when it needed to be funny, and it was scary when it needed to be scary, but we don't all need to 100% agree or see eyeball to eyeball on every single movie, but I'm just thrilled that there are so many great horror options out there for us to dissect and enjoy, and we still have Jimmy and Stiggs right around the corner. We have a new Conjuring movie. We've got Black Phone 2. We've got a horror movie by Osgood Perkins called Keeper. Like, there are tons of horror movies coming our way in the not-so-distant future, so I remain long and bullish on the horror genre. But I think that's about all I have to say. Feel free to disagree. You won't hurt my feelings whatsoever. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. But if you like this video, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. You know the drill. But I hope everybody has a great weekend at the movies. I'll be off for a couple days. I'm going to be down in Virginia and North Carolina until next Tuesday. But I do have a 75th anniversary video planned for Sunday, so stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.